We also went to Sridham Mayapur. Mayapur is the headquarters of the ISKCON movement, even now in India, but it was the headquarters of Lord Chaitanya's movement because he was born there. And so the Harinam Sankirtan movement was actually originated in what is now West Bengal, and it's called Mayapur. And in Mayapur, there's one area called Nabadweep. Nabadweep means 9 islands. Dweepa means island. Naba means 9. So it was quite an interesting journey just to get there. You sort of ride on a boat, pay a boat walla, and he takes you from one island to another island, and you walk across this island, and you get on another boat and go there. And I remember riding on a little narrow gauge train which looked like it belonged in Disneyland. It was like 1 seat wide, and there was no roof on it. It was just like a little toy train, a little choo-choo train, and a very narrow gauge little track, and we went for some miles on that. So it was a very interesting ride just to get there to Mayapur. So it was a very remote area, really, especially at that time. Not many people were going to Mayapur. It wasn't that popular as a tourist destination at the time because it had become somewhat obscured over time that this was Lord Chaitanya's birthplace. There were festivals. There were Vaishnava festivals there and meetings and things like that, but it was not as prominent or well known then as it has now become, thanks to Prabhupada. Prabhupada has kind of put Mayapur on the map. Now, I had heard that Prabhupada had been looking for land in Mayapur for some time, and we heard that he had wrote to his godbrother Sridhar Maharaj, who lived in Mayapur, and he requested Sridhar Maharaj just to give him a very small piece of land so that he would have like a base there. Prabhupada just wanted to establish a small little base of operations in Mayapur, and then he could from there expand out, buy more property, and so on. But what had happened was that Sridhar Maharaj jacked the price way up beyond the normal market price even. So you would have thought that one of Prabhupada's godbrothers would give him a discount price and be encouraging him, but instead Prabhupada complained that Sridhar Maharaj had made an exorbitant price for this land. So we were thinking already there was a problem because maybe the godbrothers of Prabhupada in Mayapur didn't want him to come there, or they were trying to just exploit Prabhupada for money. Either way, it didn't look good. But anyway, somehow or other, some devotees secured a land there, and we came. And they made one very small brick hut just for Prabhupada to stay in when we were there, and then there was otherwise just some like tents for us. So it was a pretty crude operation. We had like an outhouse for the bathroom and stuff like that. It was kind of like camping out. So we were there for a couple days, and I didn't know, but Prabhupada had actually told the devotees not to really go around and visit the other Gaudiya Math temples because there had been some problems. Specifically, again, some devotees went to Sridhar Maharaj's temple. Himavati, who's the wife of Hansadutta, she went there. And the disciples of Sridhar Maharaj were saying Prabhupada is just the guru of the hippies, and we're all a bunch of malechas, and they were laughing. They were laughing and joking about Prabhupada. So she came back and she was crying, and she said they were insulting you over there at the Sridhar Maharaj temple. And so Prabhupada says, well, I don't want anyone to go to Sridhar Maharaj's temple. But when I went there, I didn't know that. I didn't know that there had been an order not to go to these other Gaudiya Math places. So I went to a couple of Gaudiya Math temples, and I noticed, first of all, there weren't many people there. It was kind of like a few old men living, at these places. But when I went from one temple to another temple, when I entered the next temple, a couple of men came out, and they were looking very angry. So they chastised me for going to the other temple. They said, don't you know that temple is bogus, and they're worshiping a bogus person, and this type of thing. So, in other words, there was a lot of competition for pilgrims and tourists amongst these Gaudiya Math temples. And I'm assuming that the reason there was competition like this was probably based on money. People wanted more people to come to their temple because they would get more money and more followers and more, accumulated wealth, you could say. So this is one of the injunctions in the Vedas, that a devotee has to be very careful not to want to have money and followers and, accumulate wealth and be attached to buildings and bricks and stones and mundane, situations. This is not good for a devotee, and especially it's not good for a sannyasi. He should not be attached to these things, and of course, one of the problems that happens when you're overly attached to money and followers is you may become attached to then sex life and more material enjoyment, which also happens amongst this so-called guru circle that we have had in the Gaudiya Math and in post-1977 ISKCON. So there was a competition, and after Prabhupada left, the same kind of thing happened amongst the ISKCON so-called gurus. They were fighting, you can't come to my zone, you can't collect in my zone, you're initiating devotees from my zone. And so there was a lot of fighting going on amongst the gurus, which was very similar, actually almost identical to these Gaudiya Math enmities between the different missions. There was like a competition. They agreed to work together on the general idea that we're all gurus. In other words, it's like a franchise. We all have our guru franchise, and don't mess too much with my franchise, and I won't mess too much with your franchise. So right away I was able to find out about this in Mayapur, that this problem was also developed there amongst these Gaudiya Math people. There was a competition, and there was a grudge between the different camps, the different guru camps there. So Prabhupada knew that many of his godbrothers there were very resentful towards his presence there, because of course here's another business in the middle of their businesses. Here's an unauthorized franchise. They've got all their Texaco gas stations all set up there, and all of a sudden the Shell station opens up in the middle of their operation. That's not good for their business. So they were very resentful. Here comes Srila Prabhupada, and he is starting a franchise without their authorization, and so on and so forth. It's going to be hard on their business. It's going to take away followers and disciples, maybe money, from their business. That's how they viewed the whole thing. So they were resentful, and they were inimical. So Prabhupada decided, let's try to appease them. So he invited all of them over. He said, let's have a big meeting, and we'll all get together, and let's make friends, and let's be peaceful amongst ourselves. So we made a little package for each of these Gaudiya Math people. It was like a charter, a book of Prabhupada. I think it was a Bhagavatam. I'm not sure, but I think maybe there might have been some little bit of money in there, but it was like a little gift package that we made, like a care package, and they were all tied up and bundled up so that when these Gaudiya Math people would come, we could make a gift presentation to them. Now apparently we heard sort of through the grapevine that there had been a meeting of these Gaudiya Math people where they were saying we should boycott the meeting. We shouldn't come. We should not come to Bhaktivedanta Swami's, program. And we heard that they were objecting, for starters, with his use of the word Prabhupada, the title of Prabhupada. They were very angry that he had used this title, and they were basically infuriated because this was a title they felt was only fit for their Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He should be called Prabhupada, and Prabhupada should not be called Prabhupada. So they did not like that. So there were many objections that they had to Prabhupada's program, and I also heard later on, I haven't had this verified, but I heard that Narayan Maharaj was at that meeting saying we should boycott the Prabhupada meeting, and he didn't show up because he was upset that the others even went to the meeting. Now at the same time, we know that Prabhupada was writing letters saying he was very discouraged by his godbrothers for trying to reinitiate his disciples and things like that. So this had already been going on, and he wrote letters saying things like, my godbrothers are giving me depression, repression, oppression, compression. So to sum that up, really, they just weren't giving him the respect that he was due. And so Prabhupada said, they're envious of me. Instead of supporting what I'm doing and encouraging what I'm doing, they're trying to criticize and attack what I'm doing. Again, this was all very useful for me because, my main opponents, my main problems, all along, even up till today, I still have my God brothers who are writing, that you're a snake and you're this and you're that. So they're giving me depression, repression, oppression, compression. It's the same exact situation. But you see, Prabhupada wanted us to be aware of this for a reason, so that when it happens to you, you're not going to be shocked, you're not going to be surprised, you're not even going to be upset. You're just going to say, hey, it's raining outside. Is it because it's cloudy? Hello? This is just a natural course of the material world. Other people are going to be inimical, they're going to be envious, they're going to attack what you're doing. So you can't let that slow you down and stop what your service is to Krishna. You just have to carry on and do your service. So Prabhupada wanted us to know, be determined, carry on, don't let these types of pitfalls mess you up so much that you stop doing service altogether. Be very careful. This is another pitfall, that you'll be discouraged by others and then you'll just give up on the whole thing. So this is like a test from Krishna. If you're being harassed by your God brothers, and so you just say, oh, well, never mind, that means you failed the test. Anyway, the meeting finally took place. The God brothers all came to our place in Mayapur. There was a group of them, I'm not sure, maybe 50 of them. And Prabhupada offered his obeisances to them. He kind of fell flat on the ground. And I don't really remember any of them offering their obeisances back to Prabhupada. Maybe one or two of them did, I'm not sure. But I also remember very clearly as they approached up towards our little cabin that we had made for Prabhupada, their faces looked quite grim for the most part. None of them seemed to be very happy. They all had a kind of a grim look on their face, like, this was a confrontation. And that's, again, very helpful for me because the same grim face is what I get from many of my God brothers when they see me, because I'm, just like Prabhupada, I'm saying, gurus are not falling down, gurus are not appointed, this type of thing. So I'm hurting their business. I'm interfering with their money-making process, and Prabhupada was interfering with their business, so they gave him the grim face treatment, and I get the same grim face treatment for the same reason. So a devotee's not supposed to be proud, so I'm not supposed to say I'm proud that I'm, getting the same treatment as Prabhupada, but at the same time, we should recognize what's right and what's wrong. And if you're doing the right thing, you don't have to be too proud of yourself, but you should be encouraged, or you should encourage yourself to do the right thing. And this is the right thing. But anyway, so they went in there and they deputed Madhav Maharaj to be their spokesman. And Madhav Maharaj just put his finger in Prabhupada's face and started yelling at him, you have no authority to call yourself Prabhupada. So they had come there with the intent of really browbeating down on Prabhupada. You have no authority to call yourself Prabhupada. Why are you doing that? You must stop that immediately. So they were challenging Prabhupada. And Madhav was their loudmouth spokesperson. Now, of course, there are a few rare exceptions of Prabhupada's God brothers who were, let's say, people he worked with and glorified, like Keshav Maharaj, for example, and B.V. Puri to a certain extent. But as we see, there were many, many disciples of Srila Saraswati Thakur, but very few of them wound up being glorified by Prabhupada. Now, if you notice, many of the Gaudiya Math God brothers of Prabhupada still call him Swami Maharaj, because this is the name they gave him, the lesser name they gave him, to avoid calling him Srila Prabhupada. So all of them, even the ones who came and challenged him and attacked him, they later on called him Swami Maharaj. And this was, in my opinion, like an insult to him, because they couldn't recognize his actual official title as Prabhupada, that he was doing the job of a Prabhupada. So they just called him Swami Maharaj, which is kind of a generic title, and which is actually a lesser title than most of them had. They all, had big Acharya titles, Om Vishnu Pad, this, that, and the other. And Srila Prabhupada, he was just Swami Maharaj. Now Prabhupada also said that his godbrothers called him a Pacha Grihastha, which means, they thought they were big sannyasis and he was just a Grihastha. So there was a tendency, a trend and tendency for many of the godbrothers of Prabhupada to, criticize him and minimize his position. At the same time, we have to realize, Prabhupada could easily have just said, okay, let's not bother going to Mayapur. I have a lot of people there who are inimical to me, so let's not bother going there. But no, he wanted to go there. He wanted to state his position and basically challenge what they were doing and say, no, you guys are not authorized. You're not acharyas. That's what I am saying. That's what I've been saying, and that's what I'm going to continue to say. And I don't care how badly I'm treated or whatever it is. So this is good. It means, you have to just stand up for the Acharya, for the worship of the Acharya, and not be too worried about the consequences. Prabhupada was not worried. Now, one of the consequences of this meeting was, it ended very badly. The godbrothers basically went away not being very happy with the situation for the most part. Now, Sridhar Maharaj was trying to patch things up. He did try to be friendly with Prabhupada. He kind of stood out from the group, but at the same time, Sridhar was very friendly with Madhav Maharaj. So it was a very awkward kind of situation. And we already had problems with people going to Sridhar's place and hearing Prabhupada being insulted over there. So, but at least Sridhar, he kind of realized this was getting out of hand, and he was worried about the situation. So he did try to act as a sort of bridge between Prabhupada and some of these other people. And Prabhupada even wrote to Sridhar one time saying, you are Madhav's friend, can't you do something to control your friend? So Prabhupada was hoping, that Sridhar Maharaj would act in this way as a bridge maker for the group. Anyway, the final result after that meeting, we had made a cornerstone ceremony where we dug a hole and put a small statue of Vishnu at the bottom of this hole. It was like a sacred ceremony. So at night, that same night, the hole was dug up and a bunch of garbage was put into the hole. So the next morning, Prabhupada called us all together and he said, my godbrothers did this. They came and they dug up our ceremonial hole here for the building construction, and they put garbage in there because they are against me. They don't like me. So they may try to harm me. So please post a guard by my door because they may try to come here and do some, physical harm to me. So Prabhupada was worried about being attacked by these godbrothers. He was worried about his safety. So once again, this was a message to me, hey, you know what, your godbrothers might try to do you harm. They might try to kill you. They might try to, whack you because you are saying, oh, gurus are not appointed, which is harming their business. As soon as money gets involved, watch out. People can snap, break, and, do violence. So at the time I was thinking, my goodness, these godbrothers, they have no idea what they're doing. They're trying to put a pure devotee into anxiety that he could be killed or hurt by them. What kind of mentality is that? What kind of reaction are they going to get? What kind of sinful reaction is that? You're trying to put a pure devotee into anxiety of violence. This is like the worst offense there is. So Prabhupada sometimes called his godbrothers severe offenders, and in particular he said Sridhar Maharaj's group were the severe offenders group. He said that in 1977. And I already saw that. I already saw way at the beginning. The godbrothers as a group were antithetical to Prabhupada, and they could hurt him. And they would hurt him if they thought they could get away with it. Probably. So that night I remember I was barely able to sleep. I was just rolling and tossing and turning because I was in a lot of anxiety. If these godbrothers came to do harm to Prabhupada, wouldn't they also do harm to all of us? Or some of us? Or any of us? So this was something that I realized, even at the time, these God brothers of Prabhupada, they're not only trying to put Prabhupada into anxiety, they're trying to put all of us, his followers, into anxiety. They're going after the whole mob of us over here. They don't like us, because we support Prabhupada, and they don't like that. But so I remember being very concerned about, first of all, Prabhupada, being harmed. I said, this will be devastating. I was thinking about Prabhupada's safety a lot, but also I was thinking about my own situation. I said, what happens if he's harmed, or he's killed, or if he's incapacitated, or something like that? Well, what's going to happen to me? I'm just like a new baby here. I've just popped out on the floor here, a brand new infant. I'm struggling to become Krishna conscious, and if something happened to Prabhupada right now, then I would be like just dying pretty much simultaneously. So I pretty much told Krishna at the time, if something happens to Prabhupada, I'm not going to continue to live after that. I'm just not ready right now for something like that to happen. Anyway, the situation seems to have calmed down after that event, so I felt a little better after a couple weeks. That's pretty much what happened. Now it has been argued that Srila Prabhupada sometimes made positive statements about his God brothers, which he did from time to time. He said they're all preaching, and he said they're doing great work for Lord Chaitanya, and so on and so forth. But one thing, if you notice, he never actually said, I accept their guru process. I accept their voted-in gurus and their appointed gurus and their idea that gurus fall down and all these other things. He never actually said, these are the ideas that I want to have incorporated into ISKCON. One of the last things he said about Sridhar Maharaj was that their group were the severe offenders group. This was in 1977. So he never actually sat down and said, okay, I'm sorry I said bad things about the Gaudiya Math because they were right. They were right to have appointed gurus. He never actually said that. He said, I'm sorry I've offended them, but that doesn't mean I was wrong about my criticisms of the Gaudiya Math. So in Prabhupada's final days, he did say that he was sorry for offending his God brothers. But at the same time, we have to realize he did not start the war with the Gaudiya Math. They declared that they were appointed as the successors. Prabhupada said, where is the evidence for that? And then they just stepped all over him for asking this type of a question. They did not like it that Prabhupada was challenging the authority of their Acharya status. They just did not like that. At one point Prabhupada said he wanted to take sannyas, and he wrote to the Gaudiya Math, and they said, well, you have to live at the Delhi temple for a year, and let's see if you can do some service there, and this and that, and if you pass our scrutiny, then we might give you sannyas. He was trying to get sannyas to take to the visa, to the American embassy, so he could get a visa. And they were giving him the runaround. Well, let's see if you can do service. Let's see that, because they knew he didn't agree with their core idea that acharyas are appointed, acharyas fall down, acharyas sometimes have illicit sex, these types of things. He didn't agree with any of that. And Sridhar Maharaj was, of course, the king of all that idea, because he said acharyas fall down, acharyas have illicit sex, acharyas go crazy, acharyas go mad after money, women, and followers. So this was their idea of the acharya, and Prabhupada just did not agree that this is the status of an acharya. And that is why Prabhupada said that the Gaudiya Math was a guru business. It was simply, they rubber stamped some gurus. He also called it rubber stamping of guru. So they artificially made some gurus, and those gurus then accumulated disciples and followers and money and buildings and assets and things like that. In other words, it was a material business. Very simple. This is a way to make money. Prabhupada said that, that Tirtha Maharaj was just a businessman. That's all. He was not a spiritual person. And I've said pretty much the same thing about my God brothers. Tamal was a businessman, mainly. And so were his associates, and so were the people who took these guru posts. They made it into a business. They made a lot of money. They had big cars, big houses, a lot of servants, this type of thing. They were using the money of the mission as a business, and not that much to spread the actual purpose of the mission, which was to, spread Krishna consciousness. But in any case, after Prabhupada said, my godbrothers might try to harm me, I pretty much have not been able to forgive them myself personally. Other people can forgive them and forget and move on, but I feel that that type of behavior towards Prabhupada is simply inexcusable. I don't find any good excuse for it. I don't find any good rationale for it. I don't find any good purpose for it. It simply is wrong, was wrong, should not have been done, and in my opinion, can't really be forgiven. Now, another problem with the godbrothers is that Srila Prabhupada said that in his final days, Srila Saraswati Thakur was very disgusted with these godbrothers. He understood that they just were waiting for him to die. They were waiting for him to die so they could sit in a big seat and take over his position. So Prabhupada said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would, sometimes they would put a plate of prasadam on his table, he would push it off and just not eat. He was just disgusted. And Prabhupada said he grew a beard out of protest. The reason he grew a beard was to protest these godbrothers who were just sitting around basically like vultures waiting to start their business. Now there was a rumor, at least in the Gaudiya Math, that Tirtha Maharaj had arranged for a doctor to give injections to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and there may have been some kind of poison in these injections. I mean, we don't know for sure what happened, but Prabhupada did say that my Guru Maharaj objected to these injections, but my godbrother Tirtha, he insisted on giving our Guru these injections. So there may be something to that. Possible, in other words, that Srila Saraswati Thakur was untimely taken away from this planet because of the machinations of these godbrothers. It's possible. Now, one thing that's interesting is that this Tirtha Maharaj later developed a very painful hernia, and Prabhupada said he would never go to a doctor. No matter how painful his situation was, he just would not go to a doctor. So Tirtha Maharaj was afraid of doctors. And I think the reason Prabhupada told us this is, he remembered how he had used a doctor to hurt his Guru Maharaj, and so he was worried that someone else would use a doctor to come after him. So Prabhupada says he lived for, something like 40 years with a hernia, and he would just never take it to a doctor to be fixed. So I think there is more to this story that we don't really know, and Prabhupada maybe didn't want us to be too much in anxiety about it. But a devotee friend of mine told me that Brahmananda came to a temple once in India and said, don't go to Tirtha's place because Prabhupada told us he poisoned our Guru. So you shouldn't eat there because he might poison one of you. So anyway, we don't know how deep the conspiracy was against Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, but we do know that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very upset because he knew they were sitting around waiting for him to die. So Prabhupada said he died in disgust. He would have died, much later, but he died early out of disgust from these godbrothers.